Charlie Kirk's death this year bothered me not because of who he was. Charlie Kirk's death bothered me because it happened on a university campus. Doesn't matter if you agree with him or not. It absolutely does not matter what he stands for. People agree with him, people disagree with it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he was shut down, it was silenced on a university campus.
Do you think actually that there is a possibility that the kind of event we saw with Charlie Kirk could happen in Canada? I know ideologically it's happening because I think it's we don't have assassins on rooftops, but maybe we have assassins on Twitter and on different platforms where people want to destroy your livelihood for what you say.
I mean, I didn't even know who he was before he got killed. To be honest, I didn't know who he was. And so I started to read about him, and obviously his views are they're pretty radical. I mean, and I think there was a movement supporting his views that was quite religious. And so there was a lot of things going on there that made Charlie Kirk a politically charged figure. I'm not sure what happened in Canada, to be honest. Just like the Charlie Kirk phenomena. I mean, anybody can get shot, but the risks are much lower in Canada due to our gun controls, and that we don't really value guns as much as the US. In many states, guns are actually valued.
If you had all the powers, change certain things, which policies would you be looking into? Which institutions would you be, or how would you even walk the way of society back from some of these things that we've discussed?
I don't think I would change anything, to be honest. I mean, it's always about cycles. And then we're in this cycle for probably 10, 20 years. I do believe that right now we're in a painful era, but the outcome is actually going to be better. I do think that it's needed. My hope is that we'll come out of here, the era we're in right now, believing that hard work, ethics, and integrity are very important values.
One of the things that came up in our last conversation was actually you were talking about institutions, academia. You talked about how professors and even academics are seeing themselves as people who are supposed to save the world instead of understanding the world. You cited examples of kind of research that some people have approached you to do. Courses about Taylor Swift. That was the first time I ever heard that, ever. And after we had that conversation, I thought, oh, it's either he's making this up or it's for real. So I did some digging into the topic and then realized, oh, goodness, that I thought, oh, I was the only one thinking about it.
It's only getting worse.
Yeah, so then I dug into that subject actually, and I invited more people who've done research specifically about the topic. Christopher Dummett, who actually did some research about the pervasive nature of DEI in academic circle. I talked to someone else, Dave Snow. Dave Snow who actually looked at research grants and how DEI has crept into it at mild level up to activist level. You go on mainstream media, like you said, one, when they want to cover this kind of topics, they have their talking point. And even if they don't have their talking point, they don't devote as much time to unpack an academic research in that regard. So I sat down with people like that and we unpacked those data. Again, YouTube does not really like it when I post those kind of videos.
Oh, probably not. No. I mean, I'm a white guy, so if I want to grant and I make sure that the PI is actually a woman or someone on my staff that actually has a better chance, and we put in the words like sustainability a few times in the grant application, and we talk about equity, diversity, and typically just by doing that we get the grant. It's a game, yeah. But I'd say that Trudeau years were just awful. I'm glad they're over because I do think that the Carney approaches. I mean, I've actually met a lot of people in Ottawa since April. The tone has changed. It's much more practical now. So I'm not saying that, I mean, it's important to offer hope to all Canadians, no matter where they're from and how they look. But at the same time, my biggest concern about the DEI agenda is that we seem to value more mediocrity or averages, excellence, and hard work. And, I know a lot of people who do a lot of hard work, but don't get any rewards at all. And so that gets demoralizing after a while. When you see other people, I've been forced to really get some of my colleagues a promotion, and they couldn't even qualify to be a PhD candidate, let alone becoming a full professor. And so my full professorship gets diluted as value because of some of the things that are happening right now in academia. And that concerns me a lot, like the Royal Society of Canada, like we're starting to, it's the most prestigious you are to give to a researcher. But right now, I mean, some people, I kid you not, one person became a member of the Royal Society this year, and her profile is not as strong as one of my students in my lab that actually has a bachelor degree.
So what did she have?
So, like her H index, when you look at citation, I mean, the one measure, I mean, you understand this world as much as anyone else. And when you look at citation, I've always, when I talk to someone, I always look at the number of citations because it gives me an idea of who they are academically and how the intellectual community recognizes that person's work. And there was one person who just got admitted to the Royal Society of Canada with about 600 citations, which is extremely low. I mean, I have a couple of students who have way more than that right now. So, and they don't have a PhD at all. So
They don't have a PhD. Wow.
no, they're in training. Yeah. Yeah, because I push them to publish, and some of these things really make me concerned about the future of academia. And it's mostly, if you're left leaning, you're in. If you're right leaning, you have to work harder to make a point. Even that, I mean, I'd say it's not enough.
People will argue and say the more educated anyone is, the more likely they are to lean left because they begin to care more about society. What would you say to such?
No, I think they left just because of who they are, I think, and the reason why they went into academia in the first place. Like in economics, for example, you may want to look at the facts and nuances, but the bottom line is that a lot of people who go into academia extremely well off. But what I've noticed is that many, not most, but many scholars who are left leaning, their upbringing was very much influenced by academia as well. And I think that there's a lot to that, and issues around social justice and try to protect the oppressed. And I'm not saying that it's actually wrong. And in fact, I mean, I in my work, I do recognize that there are some major failures in society. I mean, there are people who are being left behind and being marginalized. And, I'm sensitive to First Nations, for example, because when I started my career, I was in Saskatchewan. I taught to 20% of my students were First Nations. And that's when I really learned that, we made some big mistakes. You know, and we have to listen to them as much as possible. In Halifax, Prickville was a terrible episode against African Nova Scotians, and I had no idea before I came to Halifax. To be honest, I didn't even know what Africville was, and since then, so you have to be sensitive to some of these issues. But there's the reality of finances and taxes and all that. So on the one side, you want to support a just society, but you have to pay your bills too. I mean, because poverty brings violence, poverty brings injustices. So you want to make sure that you create. So it's more a matter of priority, I would say. To me, wealth creation is peacemaking tool. It's a peacemaking path towards justice in essence. Whereas a lot of people will say, you know what, doesn't matter. We need to be just like right now. And then the rest will actually. So I find it's more about how you prioritize wealth and justice and equity and all these things. So I tend to value, let's actually make sure that people have the wealth, that we actually have market conditions allowing more investments and people create jobs instead of the other way around. Because you see it right now. I mean, when the economy goes down, you do see some civil unrest, more so than before. And I would want to avoid that as much as possible.
Right, right.
You see, so
I see.
so they're not wrong. I mean, people who actually believe in social justice, first and foremost, they're not wrong. It's just it's how you get there typically. And that's why we tend to have these debates. And of course, the biggest problem that we have right now in academia is that there is no room for debates. The left-leaning academics then think that they have the right path and there's no room. And if you actually prioritize wealth, you're wrong and you shouldn't be allowed to speak up. That's
Yeah, but
a big problem.
yeah, but that's not limited to academia only. It's pervasive in our
But
culture.
academia has a role to play in society.
A huge one.
Charlie Kirk's death this year bothered me not because of who he was. Charlie Kirk's death bothered me because it happened on a university campus. Doesn't matter if you agree with him or not. It absolutely does not matter what he stands for. People agree with him, people disagree with it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he was shut down, it was silenced on a university campus. So it was pretty symbolic and frankly hurtful for me because I thought, wow, someone actually gets shot on a university campus like that? Like, why would you ever want to debate anything? Universities are no longer safe places for anyone.
Does it make you to self-censor a little more?
Oh, of course, you self-censor for sure. I've been self-censoring for a while now. Just avoid topics. I'm a white man, so I'm not going to talk about things that aren't necessarily related to me. I am privileged according to society, so it doesn't matter how hard I work. I'm privileged, so everything I got was for free and with no effort. So people are assuming that, and that's fine.
There's an option to walk our way back from all these, to actually create an equitable society in the real sense of it, not a society where someone like yourself feel like you're being sabotaged, because I think that's what it sounds like. And I've actually listened to
Well,
many of
I
my.
I'm first of all, I have a great job. I'm personally not sabotaged by myself. I've been lucky because it kinda happened after I started my career, but to be honest, I don't think if I were to apply for my job right now, I don't think I would get it.
Why not?
I mean, I was dean. I know we have quotas, and of course, because you have to work with HR.
I think in academic circle there is actually still more. There's still more white people than other minority groups.
Oh, of course, yeah, and that's why so HR, which really is the department hiring people now, not deans or presidents, they don't have power anymore. So HR will come in your office as dean and say, "Okay, so you have so many First Nations, so many blacks, so many women, and so we have to reverse that." So whenever we have a competition at universities, it clearly says if you're a white Caucasian male, we discourage white Caucasian male to apply to a certain role. Some universities are actually pretty explicit about it now. To me, it's better like that because a lot of universities and Dow actually is one of them. Dow actually will write white male Caucasian are discouraged to apply. They're not prevented to apply, but they're discouraged to apply, which means that whoever we're going to hire is not going to be a white Caucasian. Now, I've accepted that because universities tend to play a leadership role in society, and I think universities should reflect somewhat what society is. And you're right. I mean, it's heavily when you walk on campus, it is still heavily dominated by white men, and so if we have to reverse that. And so we have to institutionalize the hiring process and allow other candidates to rise above, and which is fine. But we need to be honest with the fact that we're not hiring the best or with equal qualifications. That's not true at all. That's not what I've seen anyways. If you're hiring a white man, you really have to be up, you have to be there. I prefer honesty than seeing institutions say, "No, we hire anyone," and, when we keep an open mind, it's not I don't see it anymore, to be honest. Yeah.
So, do you think actually there is a possibility that the kind of event we saw with Charlie Kirk could happen in Canada? I know ideologically is happening because I think it's we don't have assassins on rooftops, but maybe we have assassins on Twitter and on different platforms where people want to destroy your livelihood for what you say.
I mean, I didn't even know who he was before he got killed, to be honest. I didn't know who he was, and so I started to read about him, and obviously his views are they're pretty radical. I mean, and I think there was a movement supporting his views that was, quite religious, and, so there was a lot of things going on there that made Charlie Kirk a politically charged figure. I'm not sure what happened in Canada, to be honest. Just, like the Charlie Kirk phenomena, let alone the fact that he would be I mean, anybody can get shot, but the risks are much lower in Canada due to our gun controls and that we don't really value guns as much as the US. In many states, guns are actually valued. You don't have that same attitude in Canada. So, would it happen in Canada? Well, I mean, it has happened in Canada. Look at Polytechnic in 1989. I mean,
I was gonna mention that.
it was in Canada. A radical person got in and killed 14 women and injured many others. And there was Concordia in 91 with Valérie Fabricant. He was a professor who actually killed 4 people. And I think he was a deranged professor, but it can happen. The reasons are probably a little different. I mean, Charlie Kirk was probably very heavily divisive, but again, he was shot on a university campus, and nobody should be shot on a university campus ever, or attacked, or violated, or harassed. I mean, universities should be safe places. But in my case, I mean, I've chosen the path of being quiet and not express my views most of the time, unless I
Are puppets though? You express your view, Dr. Charlie Boy.
out there in the community, of course, but not on campus.
How else would you have expressed yourself
Now,
on campus otherwise?
the challenge that I have is that when I'm in a room, when I'm a professor and I teach, the first thing I say to my students is that, well, you'll see my comments out there about certain issues, but that's for the community. It's about debate. But in this room, classrooms are sacred rooms. You're allowed to express your views, even though you may think that I disagree with you. I'm not, and I never, ever in a classroom express my views ever on anything. I ask
Why not?
because I don't wanna feel anybody uncomfortable. I wanna make people feel comfortable about expressing their own views, thinking that not thinking that 'cause the thing about me is that I'll have an opinion, but it doesn't mean for example, I mean, a lot of people think that grocers are abusing, they're elevating food prices. It's an ongoing debate. It's been going on for a few years now because of inflation. Wholeheartedly disagree with that, but at the same time, I do understand why people think otherwise, and I try to understand why people think otherwise. That's it. So in my classroom, I won't say you're wrong or you're right. As a professor, my job is to facilitate a circle of knowledge. Everyone knows something. Everyone has experiences, and especially I teach at the graduate level, so you have to respect people's experience and comments and thoughts as much as possible. That's very sacred to me. That's very important. When I hear students talk, I kind of realize after the first class that they know who I am and they know that I do work with politicians and policymakers in Ottawa, and my job is to influence policy. I don't hide from it. That's my job.
If you had all the powers, let's say you had an executive power today to change certain things, which policies would you be looking into? Which institutions would you be, or how would you even walk the way of society back from some of these things that we've discussed?
Like for universities, you mean, or?
Yeah, for universities. Yeah.
I don't think I would change anything, to be honest. I mean, it's always about cycles. And then we're in this cycle for probably 10, 20 years. I do believe that right now we're in a painful era, but the outcome is actually going to be better. I do think that it's needed. My hope is that we'll come out of the era we're in right now, believing that hard work, ethics, and integrity are very important values. And because I mean, when you decide to hire certain people over others, not based on merit, but based on how they look, people may argue, well, it was like that before, so we're just kind of selecting differently, which is true. But I do hope that one day we'll focus back on hard work and merit as much as possible. And so when we have a more diverse workforce, doesn't matter how you look, you'll have role models everywhere to aspire. And so that's my hope. It's funny because my son graduated last year, and at his graduation, all the top executives of the university were on the platform, and there was just not one white man at all, like zero. So he feels there's nobody to look up to now. It's which is interesting because that's how the marginalized felt for many decades before. But again, I do think that at some point people will say, maybe we went too far here and we'll actually, we'll have a more balanced approach and we'll make sure that there is full representation here. Because right now there's too much against being against something of focusing on diversity and equity because we're against something. I'm hoping at some point will be for actual social justice for everyone, not just people who've been oppressed for many, many decades. So I do sympathize with people who've suffered for many, many decades for sure, and I include women as well. But I do think that right now we're a little bit too far, and I'm hoping that we'll get back to a more balanced approach on it, on hiring and supporting excellence as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a very comfortable spot to
But
wrap
I'm a
this up,
white guy,
Dr.
so
Charlebois.
I'm a white guy, so I take
Yeah,
it
But
with a grain of
but
salt.
but you know what? I hate when we have to say those kind of things. Like if I get into a room, I hate to say that I'm a black man. Not because I'm not. If there's any way I want people to relate with me in a room, is one based on my character, based on my intellect, and based on my personality. If I would use the Gen Z word, based on my vibe, in fact, my energy, if you would say, whatever, for you to first of all think, oh yeah, I'm the only black guy. Sometimes it's after the fact, actually, when I leave rooms or meetings, that I realize maybe I'm watching the video or something, or I just think back on it, like, well, it looks like I was the only black guy there. But I think as soon as you look at the color of your skin, the context of an intellectual or even a social circle, I think it reduces the conversation to almost the barest minimum level of intellect or even of humanity. Because I think honestly, our skin color, placing it side by side, humanity, it has almost the least value. I think there are many other factors in humanity that outweigh skin color. So I wish society is not like that. Honestly, and when I say this, people of my own skin color from minority groups, they feel like, oh, you're being whitewashed. That's why you're saying that.
I honestly, I don't care how you look. I have a job to do, and I published with I think 200 people in my life, and I published with people from all over the world, black, whites, women. I just published this morning to a paper with two people from China, and I just love it because the more you're exposed to different cultures and different ways of thought, the stronger you get intellectually. That's all I
Yeah,
care
and the
about.
more you understand the world.
And that's why we're having this conversation this morning, because after this, and we this is not our first. I mean, it's our second, I think, maybe third.
A
I don't know.
third.
Every time I come, the reason why I accepted to talk to you at 6 o'clock in the morning is because it's worth it. Because I learn, and it makes me a better person.
I'll say one final thing before we end the call. I've said this before, and people of minority groups didn't like it, but it's the truth. I've lived in Canada for over a decade. I'm Canadian now. I'm Canadian by law, by conviction, and by choice. Of African descent, I'm Nigerian by birth. The best of the experiences I have had in Canada so far, they are actually connected with white Canadians. I have learned a whole lot from white Canadians. In fact, to understand, I always tell migrants this, you want to understand the culture of the nation that welcomes you as a host nation, you need to talk to the people on ground. If you only embed yourself in your social enclaves among people of your skin color, of your tribe, of your culture, we're gonna have a ghetto. And go to Toronto. That's why we have all of that. Go to places in Ottawa. That's why we have a ghettoization of urban centers. But I talk to people that you want to understand Canada. Talk to people like the age of Dr. Charlebois. Talk to people in their 70s who've actually lived the experiences. I have books on Canadian history here, but it doesn't feel the same if I'm talking to a 70-year-old Canadian. In fact, how do I communicate within the culture? How am I able to communicate with someone like you? Because this is one of the problems that people from minority groups have. They can't even communicate with Canadians or people in their host nation. How am I able to bring people like yourself to a podcast? And I'm not talking about, legals in Nigeria and I'm stuck in the past like that, but understanding the context of where I live. It's actually because I chose to interact with people like yourself. And believe it or not, the best of my experiences came from white Canadians. My first guest on this podcast is a white American military veteran. My second is a white Canadian. You, belong in the category. About 90% of the people who've actually said yes to me on this podcast, who actually helped me grow, they're white Canadians. The first platform I ever had in Canada was actually given to me by a local Nova Scotian. My professor in grad school is white French Canadian. This whole nonsense about something is related to privilege and it's white people sabotaging people from minority groups, it's all nonsense to me. Or maybe it's not nonsense, for it's not been my lived experience. And I didn't write an email to you the first time saying, "Oh, Dr. Charlebois, and by the way, this is my diversity and inclusion statement in the footnote of my outreach email to you." It doesn't produce any result. We talk and we have great conversation with yourself, with other intellectuals in Canada, and it's fantastic. It's way beyond, honestly, me limiting myself to I'm a black man. And so what? And so what?
I know.
So
I'm
my best experiences came from people like yourself, and people can go do whatever they want to do with that information, but it's just a fact.
I'm glad that you've had some pleasant experiences with Canadians as you arrived in our country, and I think there's a lot to celebrate about Canada, Canada's diversity, and I believe in multiculturalism, to be honest, and I think there's a lot of gains. It makes our country stronger, but at the same time, we need to make sure that now we honor the past as much as how we honor the future. We've made mistakes in the past, and we will continue to make mistakes in the future. By the way, I mean that's the we're humans. We make mistakes, and so we have to live with them. It's the canceling and all the stuff that's been happening, and to me, it just went a little overboard for a while. I mean, we were canceling for a while. We were canceling like songs, and it was a little heavy for a while. Now I think it's not as bad as it used to, and I think we're starting to realize that maybe just maybe we went a little bit too far. So that's why I'm hopeful. When you ask me the question, what would I change? I don't think I would change anything because we're already seeing more people realizing that perhaps we went a little too far. And so, which is nice. And with some empathy, you can do a lot. You can with institutional empathy, you can do a lot. That's all that matters, really. That people feel heard and that feel recognized. And right now, I mean, there's a group that just doesn't feel very recognized, but it's not cool to say anything right now. But it will eventually. I think it will eventually become okay and safe to say something.
Well, I'm going to let you roll, Dr. Charlebois. We're going to come back to our conversation. It's an evergreen one, so I think there's going to be room for us to come back to it. Maybe later in January.
Absolutely. I'm always available. And if you invite me, I'm always going to make myself available, even if I'm
I
not on
appreciate
vacation.
that. I appreciate that. And thanks for even cutting out an hour for this conversation while you're on vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah.